every 25 years. It's an ancient tradition in the church. It's been going on for more than 2,000 years because it's an Old Testament concept. And in the Old Testament, they had a Jubilee year every 50 years. And, the Old Testament readings say the people called together, they had a fast, and then they had the excess, and they brought back all the harvest, and they had big celebrations. And every 50 years, they stored up everything for that 50-year celebration of the Jubilee. And the Catholic tradition we've continued in, and we do it every 25 years. So you might remember, those of you who are old enough, the Jubilee of the year 2000. And part of Jubilees are pilgrimages. And then the Pope usually calls a theme. A Jubilee year is a time of reconciliation and renewal, is what they're really called for. Part of the tradition of Jubilee years is that we believe that God forgives the debt of sin. He's already forgiven our sins. I always tell people that. He did that on the cross. But every sin leaves in its wake some hurt, some injury. And the example is, if you insult someone, you can say, "I'm sorry," and they can say, "You're forgiven," but the damage of that sin lasts a long time. And so what an indulgence is simply a belief that God will indulge us and wipe away the wound of sin. Not just the sin, but the wound left behind. So if you shot someone with an arrow, you can believe that Jesus pulled the arrow out when he died on the cross. But the wound is still there. And it takes a long time for those wounds to heal. And an indulgence says that God will indulge us and heal the wound more quickly. So by going to different churches, pilgrimage churches, by going to different services throughout the diocese, by participating in different aspects of the Jubilee year, the church has promised you an indulgence and says that if you exercise this spirituality, the wounds that your sin have caused in the world or to the people you love will be healed more quickly. Now, Protestants get this very confused because they say Jesus forgave sin once and for all. He did. Nobody's arguing with that. But as I said, the wound of that sin remains. And so by your good efforts, your good prayer, your good spirituality, your intentions, those sins can heal quickly, more quickly. I don't remember, Father Simone, does the church promise an indulgence if you go to a mission? Let's just pretend that it does, okay? And I can't do that on my own. I'm not a pope yet, but if I do get to be pope, I'll make sure you have an indulgence, okay? I suspect the Lord sees that you're here and he smiles upon you, and if there's some hurt in your life that maybe your sin has caused or someone else's sin has caused, let's pray together that wound will heal more quickly, okay? And celebrate that Jesus already has forgiven it. The first night I talked about what we believe in. That's the roots of faith. What we believe in points us in the right direction. If we believe irrational things, we're going to get confused and get lost as people. And it usually shows itself in some emotional response that's way out of perspective. If we believe only in people or something we can see, we're going to be sorely disappointed because all the things we believe in that we can see, like that new house we want, or the new car we want, or the new job we want, or the pretty wife we'd like, they'll all leave us disappointed. They won't provide what sometimes the world tells us they'll provide. So we really need to believe in something that we can't see, which is God. And by turning our beliefs to what we cannot see, the divine, we know a couple things that St. Paul tells us. That we will never be left disappointed, and that thing we cannot see will reward us in the days that we see what we have believed in. We'll know the benefit of it. So think about what you believe in, hold on to what you believe in, and be sure that you believe in something that you cannot see. And I hope and pray that it's God. Having said that, I want to go back to what I said last night, and there was a young man sitting over here. I don't know if he's here tonight. I was hoping he was. He might be somewhere else in the church. But his dad said, "Can you speak a little bit about being an atheist? You kind of blew my kid's mind." And I wasn't very sensitive to that young man. And I was at the very end of my talk last night, and I said it kind of quickly. But when I tease a little bit about the fact that I had 10 minutes of being an atheist, I kind of mean it. There was a moment when I was diagnosed with cancer that I couldn't pray. I talked about that the first night. My beliefs were tested. I had to ask myself, what do I believe in? And I struggled with, why did this happen? And I wanted to blame God, because that's sort of the irrational belief we all have, that God can fix anything and that God's will be done. And apparently God's will was that I had cancer. And it made a real contradiction in my mind. So I remember sitting on a rock, and I said this that night. I sat on a rock and I had such doubts, I decided to be an atheist. It was a conscious decision. All this stuff is a bunch of hooey that we've been told for 2,000 years to make us feel better as people, that there's a God that loves us, there's a God that will walk with us through any journey and any darkness and any suffering, that God will heal us if we ask for it, if we have the faith the size of a mustard seed. My cancer would go away. And I thought about all the things that I had been told and that I had begun to believe in. And I put them in this hand and said, it's just a nice story to help us get through those dark moments. That was my moment of being an atheist. I just want everybody to know that. I don't think I literally became an atheist, but I wanted to see what life felt like if I didn't have God, if I didn't believe in God. So I tested myself and thought, okay, this is the world. All that stuff is a nice story, but it's not true. There is no God, there is no Jesus, there is no cross. And I just sat there with that. And then I started to think about what I believe in. And I thought, well, I believe there's a God. I believe that God will be with me. I believe that God's will be done. I believe that if he wants me to be healed, I'll be healed. If he wants me to die, I'll die. He'll take care of that. He'll take care of the people I love. And I went through the whole litany of what I believed in about God. And I weighed the two. And I thought, okay, which one makes my life meaningful and which one makes me feel better? And I consciously chose to believe what I had always believed, that there is a God, that he does love me, that no matter what happens, he's going to be with me. Because this just left me empty. Being an atheist had no answers. It brought no meaning to my life. It gave no sense to my cancer. It gave me no hope. It didn't give me anything to live for. It didn't give me any desire to live. And I thought, I don't know which one's right. And neither do you. That's what faith is. It's a conscious decision to believe in something that makes life meaningful and real, and it takes our suffering and puts it into context. It takes all the hurt and brokenness and confusion of our life, and it gives us a way through it. Not necessarily an answer, but a way to survive. And it could be a story. There might not be a God, but I don't really care. At this point, I'm going to place my faith in something I cannot see because it makes my life meaningful. Does that make sense? So if you have a child that heard me say I was an atheist, I did say it. It didn't last long because atheism doesn't answer anything. And in fact, I've often thought this, it would be far harder to be an atheist than it is to be a Christian. There's no answers in that. Oh, this could be God. You would laugh. What if it was? Good timing. It was somebody looking at my chickens. I know. I'll tell you about the chickens later. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. And that's really what faith is. Faith is a decision. You really kind of have to make it. That I choose to believe this, I choose to place my faith in it, and then let the life that you live happen. And okay, do you know who it was? Okay, good. Please tell him, because I didn't mean not to be sensitive to him. I just moved on kind of quickly, and I don't want to really. If his father comes back and says, my son left the church and will never go back, I thought, okay, good, do that. I would like that. Okay. And last night I talked about hope. And I really like to think of hope as the energy that gets us through it. I don't know if you need to remember anything else I said about last night, but hope is a wonderful thing to have. And you know what hope is when you feel hopeless. when you don't have anything to look forward to and no reason to live. And if that happens to you, then I would suggest you buy chickens. Okay? Anyway, so that gives my dad a little bit of hope. At 93 years old, he has something to look at and do and be excited about. Tonight at dinner, I said, well, my mom died and Dad wanted something to look forward to, so he bought chickens. And he said, they didn't replace rosemary. I said, yeah, well, I didn't mean that either. Okay. So that was our last 2 nights. And tonight, I told you that I'm doing faith, hope, and love, those 3 elements of our journey. And as I was thinking about love, I told you this last night, I want to talk about love, but there's 2 little issues that I have to do, and I'm looking around you a little bit. How many children are here? Because I have to talk about sex, too. Okay, did you hear me? Because I don't want to embarrass Mom and Dad, and I don't want to mess up their kids, but they hear this in school all the time. Because I have to talk about love tonight and tell you what love isn't first, okay? And I have to say this, and I hope if you disagree with me, you just write me a nice note. Love is not anything that is being depicted in our society today, especially if you watch movies or television or whatever, because what our world has done in a highly sexualized world is they have equated sex and love. And you almost can't separate the 2. It's almost impossible. Now, what that has done to people is that's caused people to believe that they cannot love if they're not loving physically another person. It's at the root of all the gender questions, all the homosexuality questions, all of the sexual morality questions, all the marriage questions, all the birth control questions, all the abortion questions. They're all rooted in the same misconception that somehow love and sex are the same thing. They're not. And I can testify to that as a celibate man, because I have lived my life for 66 years not having sex. And I never will forget, I went in to buy a pair of ski boots right after I got ordained a priest. And I told the lady, she was sitting there helping me, and she said, what do you do for a living? And back then I was just a priest for a year or so, and I was a little awkward in the answer. And I said, well, I'm a priest, a Catholic priest. And she said, you don't have sex? Now, I would like to ask you, right after you got married, how many of you were asked that question? It was kind of devastating, because I thought to myself, okay, what am I supposed to say to that question? I was appalled that she even asked it. And I said, do you mean that I have nobody to love? And she said, well, yeah, because if you're not married and you're not sexually active, you won't ever know what love is. And I want to tell you this and testify to it in person. That's nonsense. That's absolutely nonsense. And there are many people in this church tonight, you don't have to raise your hand, who are not having sex, but who are experiencing profound love. And I have experienced profound love. In fact, I'm going to step out on a limb and say I suspect I and Father Simone and any of the rest of you who have lived celibate lives may have experienced love at a deeper level than many, many married people, and certainly many young college students that are sexually active. Because what we discover in our celibacy, and this is the great testimony of celibacy, is that sex and celibacy are 2 different things, and that love is really experienced in celibacy at a profoundly wonderful level. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to ask you some questions. How many of you love your brothers and sisters? Yeah, right? Maybe you don't like them that much, but how many of you love them? How many of you love your mom and dad? How many of you have loved your grandparents? And I bet you anything, the 99.9% of people have never been sexually active with those close relationships in their life. And so think about the terrible, terrible message that the world gives us when they say sex and love are equated. Now, think about a generation or two generations that have seen that on every television show they've watched. A guy meets a girl, they go have sex, they date for a couple years, and then they finally decide they're in love. That's not the way it works. Sorry. Think about how many marriages have been ruined because suddenly the sexual aspect of the marriage, it's not working out quite right. Think about how many people have practiced artificial birth control because somehow they don't remember that they can still love each other in a chaste way, even in marriage. That, you know what, this is going to sound terrible. Marriage can exist, love can exist in a chaste way, even in marriage. And so if you have to fast from sexuality for a period of time, you'll survive if you know how to love. And that's a message the world is not going to give you. And so I really want you to be aware that what I'm going to talk about tonight has nothing to do with sex. I'm done with that conversation. Someday Father Simone can invite me back to do a parish mission on sex. I'd really like that. Because I could talk about it all day long. But the problem is you get that message all the time, and I don't even know if most people are aware of it. I don't really think they are. I have so many married couples that have come to me for counseling, and all I hear is issues in the bedroom. And the reason they have issues in the bedroom is because they watch too much television, they're looking at the internet too much, they're in love with pornography, and they have this belief, which is completely irrational, that if they're not active sexually, they aren't experiencing love. And that is an irrational belief. Love transcends even the physical aspect of your marriage. And the challenge in our life is to learn how to love. And if for a period of time, even in marriages, you can't express that love in the most perfect way, which is physically, then you have this great opportunity to experience love in a different way, in a new way, in a way that transcends even your bodies. And I think that's a powerful invitation for married people. My goodness, I tell people sometimes, especially if they're trying to practice natural family planning, I say, it's an opportunity for you to go on a date again or to go out to dinner. And I had one couple say, yeah, but every time we do that, guess what we want afterwards? And I says, well, you have to challenge yourself a little bit. And this is where being celibate doesn't always help, because it's like, I forget that sometimes when they start falling in love, couples want to fall in bed, because that's the natural progression of love. And that's as it should be. That's as it should be. You should romance each other, date each other, get to know each other, spend time with each other, and then if you want to express that love and you're married, it's the perfect place to do it. Young people in college that are sexually active before they've fallen in love or committed themselves in marriage are on a one-way road to disaster. Whether you ever watch that on television or not, and they never show it, but it's just opening their lives to tremendous pain and suffering. Because in essence, what love is a complete and total giving of self. And ideally, that's what sexuality is supposed to be a result of. And so when they are giving themselves to another person, and they believe they're giving the best they have, which is their physical bodies, but there is no love, then guess what happens? They've just experienced an irrational belief, which is that sex outside of marriage can be meaningful. That's not true. And I think lots of people believe it is. Hollywood certainly does. Our society does. But it's an irrational belief. Because what you have to have in order to give yourself completely to another person is the security that the other person is not going to walk away from you. That the other person is going to love you and accept you and be a part of your life. I tell young couples that I prepare for marriage, especially if they're living together, I say, you know the problem with living together? And they always tell me, well, we're doing it because we want to make sure we're compatible in every way. I said, well, the problem with that is 90% of young couples that live together are having a good experience. They're having fun. It's physically fun. It's fun to build a house together. It's fun to move in together. They're enjoying themselves playing house. And it's all good. And they like it. And so they make a commitment based on what they're experiencing. But that's not what love is, nor is that what a commitment is. A commitment has to be made, like faith, in something you cannot see. Because if you make a commitment only by what you can see, guess what happens? What you see changes, and you end up being disappointed. And when it's disappointing and all of a sudden it's not fun anymore, guess what young couples do? They get divorced and go look for somebody else that's going to be able to meet their expectations. But if you make a commitment in faith on something you cannot see, then guess what happens? The things that you're looking at, the things you can't see, come your way. You didn't know that your spouse was going to get sick. You didn't know your spouse was going to turn ornery when they had hard work to do. You didn't know that you were going to fight. And if your love is like faith, you have faith in something you cannot see, guess what? You can persevere through it. And that's the real critical problem. So I get so frustrated with Catholic couples whose kids are living together, and they don't want to alienate their children because they don't say anything, and they say, well, what are we supposed to do? We want our kids to come home, and we love our kids. And I said, well, tell them the truth about commitment. You can speak truth with love. You don't have to chew them out, tell them they're going to hell. You don't have to reprimand them, and you probably won't change them. But at least tell them the truth about what the nature of commitment is. It's the same as faith. You have to believe in something you can't see. And the only way to do that is what I said last night. You have to start with prayer. And you have to root yourself in faith in God. That if we don't know what the future is going to bring, and we have faith in our love and faith in something we cannot see, then like our faith in God, it will never disappoint. And you can survive, and you can stay married. That's why couples my mom and dad's age did not struggle with divorce, because they made a commitment to the unknown, what they couldn't see. My mom used to joke. She said she dated my dad. She met him here in CSU. My dad was in the Air Force, and they had their training here in Fort Collins for 3 months. And my mom met him at a dance they had in her dorm up at Lowry Hall. And they talked and dated for 3 months, and then he got shipped to Europe during the Korean War. And they wrote back and forth for a year. And then Dad said, come over here and I'll marry you. And guess what my mom, the little farm girl from Meade, did? She told her mom and dad she wanted to fly to England and get married. And it's my grandma, to who? To the guy I met last year in Fort Collins. And I mean, talk about not knowing each other, and talk about stepping into something they didn't know and they couldn't see. Well, it worked. They'd married for 70 years. So, you know, young people, tell the truth, folks. Tell your kids this, because, oh my gosh, our world is telling them something so opposite. And they want to be loved. And they're excited because they're falling in love. And that's all good. That's all good. And thanks be to God, they're falling in love. But sex and love are two different things. And I hope as your little kids grow up, you begin to make that distinction early on. Because boy, oh boy, there's a lot of pressure out there, and it's a message that's contradictory. It contradicts everything they hear, And it, like I said, it's at the root of all these issues. I always find it fascinating when our government decided to legalize gay marriages. They said, well, people have a right to love whoever they want. And that's absolutely true. And two men can love each other. Gosh, my best friends are all men practically, because when I fall in love with a woman, it gets very complicated. But you know, it's like, why don't we just celebrate that? Same gender people can love each other. Two women can love each other. Two men can love each other like brothers, like sisters. And instead we rob them of even the freedom to do that when we say, oh, people have a right to love whomever they want, so we're going to bless their marriages. Well, you could even bless their friendship. But that's what Pope Francis was saying, by the way. You can bless their friendship. You can bless same-sex friendship. But the implication is, especially in the world that we live in, is there's a sexual aspect to it. And you can't bless that. That has nothing to do with procreation. It has nothing to do with marriage. It's not marriage. It may be love, but they're not the same. We just have to start telling the truth, and we're not, okay? So how do we know what love is? How do you know what love is? Well, the church calls love charity, and it's very interesting. If you ever look at the catechism, and you look up mortal sin and see if there's a list of mortal sins, there's only one thing named in the catechism that is a mortal sin. Do you know what it is? A lack of charity. Now, the church and the church's teaching have said there are grave evils in the world. And if you participate in a grave evil with full knowledge that you're participating in a grave evil and you have the freedom to do it, then it can be mortal to your spiritual life and to your life. But there's only one specific thing that's called a mortal sin, which means it always destroys you. And that's a lack of charity. That's how simple it is. A lack of charity is a mortal sin, which means our inability to give of ourself completely without counting the cost. That's love. That's love. That's as simple as I can get, is to give ourselves completely without counting the cost. I was trying to figure out something to talk about with this topic tonight a couple days ago, and my sister called me, and she wanted to tell me something that happened at their house last Sunday. They live up in Wyoming, and they live on a pretty big river. And she said the ice is melting on the river, and it's running pretty high. And she said the kids were all here, all her grandkids were out there playing on the river, on the ice. And she said, I was a little nervous because it was still breaking, and at the top of the part where it was breaking, the river was going under the ice pretty fast. And she said, but they were jumping around on the ice and playing. There were about 6 of these little kids out there. And she said, I was sitting on the porch, and I was kind of thinking, oh dear, I got to get those kids off that ice. And the dog started to bark. And they have this old dog, Max, who can hardly walk, and he just kind of scoots around like me. He moves kind of slow. And she said all of a sudden Max was just getting all perky and excited and started barking. He ran down there on the ice. And he started to even nip at the kids and to bark. And he was getting them frustrated because he never did that. And she said they all started scattering and the ice broke. And she said, and Max went in the river and he floated under the ice and drowned. And I told her, I said, that's love. That's perfect love. No greater love is there than this, than to lay down your life for a friend. And somehow an animal had an instinct to perfect love. He saved 4 kids by getting them off the ice. And somehow he had an instinct about that. Wouldn't you love to love that way? To give up your life for people? How many of you would? Don't raise your hand because I'll call you a liar. Because if you say you would, you wouldn't. Because most of us don't want to give up our life. Because if you start thinking about how conditional our love is, if you're really honest with yourself, it's really hard to give up an hour for someone in need. It's hard to give up 5 minutes sometimes. It's hard to write a letter. It's hard to make a phone call because we're busy. We have a lot to do, and we want to take care of our own lives. And we don't want to give up too much. We'll give up what we need to, and often we'll give up what we don't even want to give up if somebody asks us nice, or if somebody really is in need. Sometimes we'll step out of our comfort zone and we'll give them what they might need. But typically speaking, that kind of love, where we're willing to die for another person, is rare, very rare, and we don't want to do it. And the reason we don't want to love that way is because sometimes we feel like we're not being loved that way. Who would give up their life for you? Do you know people you can call in a moment that would actually come, and if they died in the process, would do it anyway? I like to believe I have a few people in my life that would do that, but I'm not sure. And sometimes what I have found in my own life is even when I get called to the hospital, I'm tired. And if it's at 2 in the morning and I have a huge day the next day, I don't want to do it at all. And I might say that I can love freely and generously, but when the rubber hits the road, typically I have to look out for me first. So that's a sin against charity. And we do it all the time. So if you go to confession, if you can't think of anything you've done wrong, say, I haven't loved freely and totally. I've withheld. And there's so many ways you can look at that in your own life. It's the gift of time. It's the gift of listening. It's the gift of being complimentary. How stingy we are with our compliments. How often we don't want to pay a compliment because nobody paid us one today. How many times we fail to say thank you because nobody said thank you to us. How many times that we fail to be grateful because if we don't complain a little bit, nobody will pay attention to us. How many times we don't want to hear other people's complaints because nobody's listening to my complaints. Those are all rooted in love, friends. Those all are. And the greatest sin we commit is that sin of withholding our love, not being charitable. Now, we do our best. I think all of us can say we do. We try to pay attention to people, but like even that little boy over there, I didn't love him very well. I could have been much more sensitive to what he asked me, but I had a million other things that were on my mind at that moment. And I get frustrated because it's like, even in spite of my best efforts, I get too busy. I can't pay the attention that I need to pay. And sometimes too tired. So one of the things that you have to keep in mind in charity is that part of love is forgiveness. And that's really important because we all need to be forgiven for our lack of charity. I would say almost all of us have moments where we withhold love because we're selfish. And I think it's important to ask for God's forgiveness because you know how it feels when somebody didn't give you the kind of love that you really needed at a moment. And you can pray for them to be forgiven. So I was thinking about that last night, and I thought, so how do we know how to love? And then I realized, I thought, in this Lenten season, we have the perfect way to learn it. And I'm going to share this with you. And I didn't even tell Father Simone I was going to talk about this. But these 40 days of fasting, prayer, and almsgiving, which is charity, are meant to bring us to the sacred Triduum. Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday. And as I was thinking about that, we have been talking about this journey of Lent and going to the promised land. Well, let's just put it in a little context for this 1 year, these 4 months or 3 months, whatever 40 days is, 2 months, and say, all right, we're on this journey through the desert called Lent. We have to pray that we can have faith. We have to fast, which means letting go and hope that somebody will bring us something to fill that emptiness. And we have to give alms. And how we do it is to follow Jesus, of course. And then it struck me, God so loved the world that he gave his only son. He gave himself. And I thought, in that act is perfect love. And if you want to understand perfect love, turn off Hollywood because they've got it screwed up. Zone out of the society we live in and the moral values being taught by society because they've got it screwed up. And focus again on what we believe as Christians. God so loved the world, he gave his only son. And I thought, he gave himself totally and completely. And the best way to realize that, and honestly, I think you have to practice it, is to go to Mass on Holy Thursday. I know it seems kind of strange. You go to the washing of the feet and the Lord's Supper and you see the Holy Thursday service. But in that Mass on Holy Thursday night, we begin what we call one liturgy. And it's the liturgy of love. It's the 3 days when we have unfolding before us how God so loved the world. Perfect love. And what it looks like. And we are reminded by every action of those 3 days how to love. And we have to do what Jesus did. And what did he do? Well, first, he gathered with his friends on Holy Thursday night. He gathered them in a beautiful room with a banquet. So I started thinking about this in my reflections, and I thought, part of love is feeding each other. So you have to love your family around the dinner table. That's where it begins, folks. If you're having trouble in your family life and with your kids, then bring them together and gather them at the table. And God forbid that families stop eating together, because that's where love in a family is born, at the table. Gather your kids. Do not be too busy to have supper together. Every night if you can, because I'll tell you what's lonely is when those kids all grow up and leave home and they're not there to have a meal with you. But love has to begin at a meal. Jesus did it that way. So we need to too. That's Holy Thursday. I hope you'll come to the Holy Thursday service, because it's a beautiful liturgy, and it begins with an invitation to come to the table, just like every Sunday Mass does. And you come to the table on Holy Thursday realizing that this night is different than all the other nights, based on the Passover, the Jewish tradition which we belong to. And the youngest kids say, why are we going to church on Thursday? And say, this night is different than all the other nights. We're celebrating that Jesus has led us through the desert and is taking us to the promised land. We're celebrating that God so loved the world that he gave us a way to paradise. And we can learn from that at the table. And we come to the table and we sing the Gloria again. After 40 days of no glory to God in the highest, we sing it again on Holy Thursday. And I don't know if Father Simone does this, but you can now. Since you're here, I'll suggest it, okay? But ring bells during the Gloria. In my parishes, I used to invite everybody to bring a bell so that all the bells would ring. And the bells ring as a beautiful symbolic way of saying to the world, come to the table. This is the table of life. This is the table of love. This is where love is born in our Christian faith. And they rang bells and sang the Gloria so everybody would come. So you bring everybody to the table on Holy Thursday. Then we celebrate the Mass as we always do. We hear the readings of our tradition, and then we go and we have the sermon, and then we have the washing of feet. Now, the washing of feet is a really important thing to think about. Jesus came into their midst, and the apostles were beginning to have a sense that he was God. And they were beginning to believe that he was sent to us from the heavens, and that he had a dignity beyond any dignity. And when he got down on his knees and he washed their feet, they were embarrassed. They were humiliated that this guest of honor would do that. And what he did in showing them his humility, he showed the humility of God. Why would God love us? I mean, God is so much more than we are. Why would he love us? Look at us. Are we worthy of it? And, you know, our feet are a symbol of our lack of dignity. In those days, the feet were considered the lowest part of the human being. They were filthy. And yet, a sign of his love was that he had enough humility to get down on his knees and wash their feet. And that's a really important lesson. It's called the great act of charity. And then we go to the Eucharist and the institution of the Eucharist. And the institution of the Eucharist is another reminder of what love is. No greater love is there than this, than to lay down our life for our friend. And how did Jesus do it? He gave us himself. And I always have this image of Jesus sitting there with those big old apostles that smelled like fish. And he looked at them and he thought to himself, oh my gosh, these guys are always hungry. They're always hungry. And he said, how am I going to ever still be a part of their life because I'm leaving them. And then he had this brilliant insight by the Holy Spirit, maybe designed by God, I suspect, that he says, I'll just become their food. And that way when they hunger, they're hunger for me. And I'll fill them in a way that they'll never be hungry again. And that's love. What an act of love that was. That he said to the disciples, if I'm your food and I'm your drink, you'll never hunger again and you'll never thirst again and you'll always be satisfied. What more can I do for you? I humbled myself and washed your feet, and now I'm going to give you my flesh and my blood so that you will never be hungry again. That is love. And on Holy Thursday, we remember all of that love. And that's a good lesson for us. And then as you gather your family around your own dinner table, you realize that that's a humbling thing to do. You have to go to work 7 days a week sometimes to pay the bills and buy the food. You have to cook the meals and prepare those meals and wash their clothes and take care of their house. And you should be having somebody do that for you, but you're doing it for them. And that's exactly what Jesus did. So you do it for your children, and someday they'll do it for their children. And that's what love is. But do we live in a world that teaches us that? No. We live in a world that says, do it for me. Do it for me, do it for me, do it for me. And I'm not going to do it for anybody unless they do it for me. That's not the Last Supper. That's not Holy Thursday. Now, here's another piece of this theologically that's really important. The Mass doesn't end on Holy Thursday night. What we do is we strip the altar and life becomes bare. And it's the same liturgy then the next day. You come back for a continuation of this liturgy of love, if you will, on Good Friday. So how does that work? Well, Good Friday has tremendous meaning if you love Jesus. If you've never fallen in love with him, and he's not your companion, and he's maybe just a theological concept that you throw around in your brain, but you've never truly come to know him, then Good Friday is not going to have a lot of meaning. It's just going to be another day of the week. But if you want to believe in something you can't see, and you want a relationship with Jesus, and you want to get to know him, and you want to experience a deeper level of relationship, then go through the motions even if you don't believe it yet. Fake it till you make it, okay? And what I would suggest on Good Friday to really come to a full understanding of what Good Friday means is pretend like it's the day that your most loved companion died. If you lost a child, think of it as the day your child died. If you lost your mother and you were dear, and she was dear to you like mine was, then think of it as the day she died, or your husband, or your wife, or your grandparents. Every one of us have lost somebody that we really miss, that was dear to us. And ask yourself a simple question. What was the greatest expression of that love? It was your grief. It was the total chaos that entered into your life the minute they died. It was that longing that just won't go away. Oh, if only I could see them again. If only I could hold them for a moment. If only I could say the things I didn't say. And I'll bet, if the truth be told, most of you, if not all of you, on the day of the funeral of the one you loved, or the day that they died, didn't go to work. And your boss let you take the day off. And if you called him and said, my wife died this morning, he'd say, or she'd say, don't come to work. Now, the question that I have to ask, and don't raise your hand again, how many of you go to work on Good Friday? And yet we say we believe that Jesus is meant to be the closest person in our life to us. He is the way, the truth, and the life. He is our hope. He is God's love. And yet we get up on Good Friday and we do what we always do. We go to work, the kids go to school, we sit down for bacon and eggs for breakfast, we eat all day, and we don't come to church. And you know what I say to our belief? I'm not going to say it. I think the test of it is we don't really believe it. I'm sorry, I have to say that. Because if you really believed it, you couldn't get yourself to go to work. You couldn't. You couldn't get yourself to go through the routine. For 39 years as a priest, I have told people every single parish I've been in, every single Holy Week, take the day off. Take the kids out of school. Take the day off. Turn off the TV. Turn off the computer. Turn off the radios. And make it an empty day. The one you love has died. And in Greeley, when I was in Greeley, I took so many kids out of District 6 schools that they had to close the school on Good Friday because they had too many absentees. And mom and dads wrote notes and said, my child's not coming to school today because it's Good Friday. And then I had people tell me, well, I have to go to work, my boss will fire me. And I said, then get a good lawyer, because our country says we have a right to practice our faith. There's not a Muslim in the world that would be forced to eat during the great fasts of Ramadan. And if they wanted to take the time off because their Muslim faith said they should, there's not a boss in the world that would stop them. We as Catholics have gotten completely wimpy about how we show our love. We've just copped out completely. If every Catholic in our society said we refuse to go to work on Good Friday, every office, every institution would have to close. So I'm just calling you to some integrity of faith and belief. And I hope you don't get fired. There you go, faith, hope, and love. But you know, the great act of love on Good Friday is to say to the world, the one I love has died. And who in our world would argue with you? And if you really believe the one you love has died, then show it by your actions. That's love. That's love. And if you have to take the day off without pay, that's sacrifice. It's okay. God will return it to you 1,000-fold. I mentioned this to a person, and I realize I've already spoken for an hour almost, but I mentioned this to a person one time. I said, you can't presume on God's love. You have to trust God's love, but you have to be reciprocal. You have to show that you understand how much he loved you by how much you're willing to love him in return. His love demands a response, and I think Good Friday is the day to do it. And then come to church and celebrate what he did. He laid down his life for us. He opened the gates of paradise for us. We wouldn't have the promise of the promised land if he hadn't done it. Okay? All right, I have a couple more minutes. What time is it? I only have one more minute. I'm going to take a few more minutes. Is that okay with everybody? Because I haven't quite got to Easter. Can I come back tomorrow night, Father Simon? I'm just teasing. So Holy Thursday liturgy goes through Good Friday and doesn't end, and then it goes to Holy Saturday. Holy Saturday is a wonderful day in the church. I've gotten in lots of trouble as a pastor because it's the day that the Knights of Columbus always want to have their Easter egg hunt. Or we have fish fries, or we do something on on Holy Saturday, because we just dread the idea that there's a day in the life of the church or in the life of the world that we don't do anything. And I would highly suggest that you don't do anything on Holy Saturday. It's called the empty day. It's continuation of the same 2 days. Holy Thursday Mass still hasn't ended. It's still going on. And this is the empty time of just prayer and grief and acknowledging what God has done for you and that he is in the tomb. And you're waiting in joyful anticipation filled with hope. So you see where the themes of this mission are. You have to have faith in something you believe in. That it will be experienced on Holy Thursday and Good Friday and Holy Saturday. And you have to have hope to carry you through the empty day of silence and fasting and quiet in your family life and in your home. And then you anticipate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And the resurrection of Jesus Christ is what Jesus did in love. He said, I will conquer all things, even death itself. And Easter Sunday, that's what we celebrate. And that's when the liturgy of Holy Thursday ends. It's a 3-day long Mass. Can you do it? 3 days long. You have to come and celebrate for 3 days, one Mass. I really highly recommend that you make the Triduum part of your Feast of Love, because it will help you understand the whole progression of love, faith, hope, and love, what I talked about all weekend. Finally, I want to end with a little story that I always have found one of the most touching stories I've ever heard. You know, one of the reasons that we hesitate to love at times is because we lose the one we love. And even the apostles experienced that on Holy Thursday. They sort of dreaded it. They dreaded what was happening and what Jesus kept saying was going to happen. And I think the fear and love is that the one we love is going to go away and going to die. It makes it harder to love sometimes. So there's a story about, it's a World War I story actually. It's a true story about two young men that found themselves in the same foxhole fighting the Germans. And they grew close to each other for the week that they spent in the same foxhole. They talked about everything. They shared their dreams and their hopes and their fear and the terrible anxiety of that they could die at any minute. And over that week, they forged a bond of friendship that was really very, very holy and very special. They loved each other. After about 5 days of sitting in this foxhole, a bomb went off right next to their foxhole and blew it to smithereens. And one young soldier kind of shook it off after he found himself laying in the field of battle. And he looked up and his friend was gone. But he heard the guns whizzing over his head, the bullets flying, and he saw the dead bodies everywhere. So all he could think about is, I have to save myself. And he crawled all the way across the field of battle back to the front lines where he knew they were 100 or 200 feet away. And he finally crossed the front line, and his fellow soldiers picked him up, wiped the blood off his forehead, and said, "You're okay, you made it back, and you didn't get shot." And he said, "Where's my friend?" And they said, "He never came back. He never got back across the front line." Without even thinking, the man got back down on his hands and knees, and he crawled back into the oncoming fire, across the field of battle, by all the dead bodies, and found the blown up foxhole. And in the bottom of the foxhole was his buddy. And he slipped down there next to his buddy, and his buddy was still alive, but he was hurt really badly. And he cradled his head in his arms, and he said to his friend, I'm here for you. You'll be okay." And the man finally opened his eyes, and he looked up and he said, "I knew you loved me, and I knew you'd come back for me." And then he died. And you know, that's the promise that Jesus made to his apostles, is, okay, I will love you to the point of death. I will open the gates of paradise so you'll come to understand what love is. And here's the good news. I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you because I love you. So, you know, I think about that sometimes when I think about my mom. That's the promise he left for all of us. That no matter how hard life gets, no matter how weak our faith might be, no matter how often we lose our hope, no matter how much we love to the point of death, no matter how much we give to another, even if it leaves us empty, the fact is the one who loved us will never leave us. He will never leave us. And if we feel like he did, he'll always come back. So practice that in this year of hope. Faith, hope, and love. They're the mysteries of life, and they lead us to paradise. Thank you for being here the last 3 nights. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate Father Simone pushing my baskets. You've been, thank you. You've been very kind to me, and I'm generous, and I'm very grateful for the love that you've shown me. It's nice to be back at St. Joe's. And my dad has even had fun. I ask him every day, "Do you want to go?" And he goes, "Yeah, I want to go. I can listen to you one more time." Now I got to get him home to his chickens. It's kind of fun. Anyway, thank you. I do have time. I do. I don't know if you do, but I do. If you have to leave, feel free. I think there's coffee and cookies downstairs donated by Paul. And thank you, Paul. I don't know if you're here tonight, but he donated it. And you're welcome to go downstairs. I'm not going to go downstairs very long because I have my dad here tonight. And it's been kind of a long week driving back and forth from Boulder. But I do want to take some time for any comments or questions. I don't want to leave you hanging because I'm not going to be back tomorrow. So you'll be left on your own. Oh, I do want to tell you this. I know a lot of people ask me, how can we contact you? How do we know where you're saying Mass? When we want to go to another mission, whatever. I invite you to be part of my Facebook page. It's sort of my parish bulletin now, and I put it back on my computer, and I decided I have to have the discipline. I know. Yes, it's my business. And I have been doing really well not scrolling on it. So if you want to know what I'm up to, go ahead and join my Facebook. And I have to tell you this, I will friend everybody that asks me in the next 3 days. But by Friday, if you haven't asked me to be your friend, then I probably won't friend you, because I don't friend people that I don't know at least some context from, okay? But feel free to do that if you'd like to be a part of what I do. I usually post where I'm having Mass, if I know ahead of time, and I usually do. And then if I have another mission, I post that as well. And then you can make comments to me on Messenger if you want to. I don't look at Messenger that often, and you can email me. I told Chad he can put my email in the bulletin. My email is really easy. It's FR for Father Greg Ames @gmail.com. So it's pretty easy. But if you want a response, I'm not very good at my emails. So maybe if I can get through this Lent, not scrolling everything else, I might look at my emails more often. But feel free, if you really have a pressing question, you can email me. Okay? If you're already my friend, do you see my Facebook page? I have. Well, good. Then you're still my friend. No, I never unfriend anybody unless they were really mean to me. And that doesn't happen too often. Does anybody have a question about faith, hope, or love that we can answer kind of quick? If it's a hard question, ask Father Simone. No? Anybody have a comment? Yes, sir, back there. Say it loud so I can hear you. There's Paul. Did you make the cookies? You didn't even make them? Well, he does cook really well if he ever does make you something. Thanks, Paul. That was a good comment. I like that comment. Anybody else have a comment? Yes.
I feel like I should give you a little bit of a follow-up to the boy last
I would like that.
My son, and he is a very faithful fifth grade student here at St. Joe's, and I think he has been seen just since priests as I did as a child as the perfect person in the faith community. So when you made that comment and his mind was blown, I think he was, it inspired a very fun conversation in the car on the way home. And I think we all walked away from it very appreciative of your honesty. And it gave us some inspiration that those human moments are allowed. And
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, so what she said, if you missed it, is her son was the one that was sitting over there, and I blew his mind when I said I was an atheist for 10 minutes, because he likes to think priests are really nice guys and pretty perfect. And I'm here to testify to the fact that that's an irrational belief. But I'm glad, thank you for sharing that, because I was worried about him. I hope he stays a good kid, okay? Because I don't want him to become an atheist. But yeah, if you look at my Facebook page, you'll see that I am pretty darn human, okay? And I'm not always in my collar, even on Facebook. So anyway, thank you for letting me know that. It makes me feel good. And it's been really a nice experience to be with you. Yes?
My name is Paul Roller, and I think you're the most inspirational speaker I've ever heard.
Well, you're so young, you haven't heard that many.
Yeah. No, I've heard quite a few. I had my 90th birthday, January 23rd, and I just want to let you know, I hope you can come back, because I'll be here.
That's a very
every
nice
night.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot to me, especially because you're not that young. So you've heard lots of speakers, and I appreciate that you came. I appreciate it. Anybody else? Not all of you don't have complimentary things to say, so let's hear some negative stuff. Come on.
Well, nothing negative. A couple nights ago, I told you I'm stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So we have something. Well, you're not stage 4 anymore, but I've been telling people for quite a few months, and you confirmed that my feeling was true, that I would go through it again.
Yeah.
Because it's taught me how to love people.
That's
better.
a beautiful testimony.
Yeah, not just my family, but friends, and yeah.
What's your name?
Tony.
Tony just said he's pancreatic cancer. He has it right now. He's struggling with it. And that he's grateful for his cancer and would do it again because it's taught him how to love. And I think that's a real testimony. I think that's beautiful because sometimes when you have nothing to lose, it's easy to give everything away. And so thank you, Tony. That's a real beautiful testimony. We'll pray for you. We'll pray for you. Okay, well, thank you, guys. Go eat some cookies. I'm going to hang out up here and say hello to some of you that I might have missed, but I'm not going to have my dad go downstairs, so if you want to say hi to him, you can. He's pretty funny. You think I'm funny. He'll make you laugh. He's a good guy. You're welcome. Thank you, Father Simone.
Okay. Thank you, Father Greg. And this is, you did a good commercial today for the 3 days of a long celebration. So please save the date. Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday. We want to see you as many as you are here now. So thank you for that commercial, and God bless you for your ministry.